commodity hardware. It's only 10 sites that are using commodity hardware. Saudi Aramco is one of these sites. Okay? And the thing about the commodity hardware, it basically, you don't need, when it comes to Linux and commodity hardware, Linux is comfortable working in commodity hardware. What other mission critical servers we run? License servers, we have centralized log servers. There are business services, like business service monitoring. Almost all my application will use a database. But if a database is down, what is the effect of this database is down? I need to know which application, which users. This is what I call a business event. So I will know my service level agreement is affected or not. And all of these servers are running on Linux. Okay, so I want to talk about directory services, which mainly we use NIS. And we actually broken the NIS protocol to serve our purposes. Okay, now, if I have an application, it's useless to me without data. Where does the data live in Saudi Aramco? 50-50. We have 50% of the data living in filers, which provide data through NFS. So Linux client can easily access it through NFS. There is no issue. If it's a Windows client, it will access it through a commercial product called NFS Maestro. And we have SAN. And actually, most of our important data is in SAN, which is the seismic data. We have around 5 petabytes of data. 2.5 petabytes of it is in SAN. Now, what happens if I am an end user and I want to access this data on SAN? SAN is expensive. Storage area networks are expensive. You need a special HPA. You need a SAN switch. Okay, you can argue that use iSCSI. You can collapse the storage area network and the Ethernet network into the same network. But then maybe I don't want to do this because my goal is high performance. I don't want to affect my compute data path. Okay? So what we do, we use Linux servers. In each SAN cluster, we use 2 Linux servers dedicated as a gateway. So they have HBAs that can access the SAN storage. And at the same time, they have Ethernet cards, which basically provide this SAN storage as an NFS. Another thing that we will see, that we have clusters a lifetime. Each cluster lifetime in Saudi Aramco is 3 to 5 years. So what happens to this 2 and 5 petabytes? We need to move it, sometimes from old technology to new technology. If you look at commercial product, it's very hard to find a product that will satisfy this criteria. Okay, especially for that large number of the storage with the different logistics requirements. So what do? We use a simple open source tool, rsync. Very simple tool. And we use tar, which is also another portable, simple tool. And we use an open source tool called the scheduler. We'll see it later. The combination of these 3 tools fits the Unix principle. Design small, okay, then integrate later to fix your solution. And using these 3 simple open source tools and Linux node, we create what is called a data mover. And we can move huge amounts of data within a week. As a backup tools, most likely you have heard about Amenda and GridFTP. We have evaluated them. They are still under evaluation. Some people like them, some people don't like them yet. Scientific workstations is basically high-end specs machine that is used for visualization, that is used to run scientific applications, geophysical application, petroleum exploration applications. And because it's exactly the same environment as the cluster, it's used for development and as the front end to the cluster. But if you think about it really, what you need to access the cluster, all you need is the terminal. All you need is BUTTY. So if you are using Windows, you need just a BUTTY shell. Or if you're using Linux, just an SSH client. Okay, and this is what Mutlaq was talking about yesterday. Excuse me. It's the in-house development. We have lots of in-house development. We have the Exploration Application Support Department doing exploration applications, and we have the petroleum application, like yesterday Mutlaq was talking about, doing the petroleum applications. So we have in-house applications, but these are few and well-known. Also, around them, we have lots of applications that create process work overflows. We have well-defined work overflows, 147 for the exploration department. We have GUIs. So basically, one problem you will see later in the challenges is that new users are not accustomed to Unix, are not accustomed to Linux. Okay? But if you design a tool that automates the process, that doesn't show him the back end, okay, it will help him adopt the solution. So by designing GUIs, by designing automation tools, by doing workflows, you make it easier for the user to accept open source. And there are administration tools for these tools and for other things. The main scripting language and programming languages that libraries used is as presented in the slide. Okay? Now, this is our main topic, the high-performance computing. So when did we start officially in Saudi Aramco adopting open source? The official date of adopting open source was 2001, 8 years after it has been tested. And that's telling you something about Saudi Aramco. I'm going to make a contradictory statement. Saudi Aramco never jumps into immature application. They have waited 8 years to jump into it. Okay? Now, if you ask me, what are we going to do next couple of weeks? We're going to deploy a cluster using Westmere Intel processor for a quad data rate InfiniBand. This is the first time this is done. Yes, this is the first time this is done, but we know it will work because we know the technical details of the components, and we have tested something similar before. So yes, we don't jump into immature technologies, but we calculate the risk. If there is a new technology that can help us, we don't mind jumping into it. Around the clusters, there are certain activities. Basically, provisioning, installing the nodes, configuring them, making sure they meet all policies, company policies. Remember, we are large. There are lots of audits, lots of corporate policies, security policies, whatsoever, that you need to comply to. We need to do benchmarking, otherwise we will not be in the top 500. We need to do benchmarking to evaluate the performance. Remember, we target performance first. Automation. We need to automate all these processes. How we monitor, how we benchmark, how we provision. And we need to install middleware layer to enable our users and developers to use the clusters. Also, we need to have data access. Without data access, we cannot run our applications. And of course, monitoring, because we system administrators like monitoring. Excuse me. Okay, so a cluster is a collection of compute nodes. You glue them together by high-speed network. And you make sure that you have access to data, locally or remotely. And this is the general definition of the cluster. There are no two clusters that are exactly the same. And this is, if you look at reports from IDC, DataPro, whatever, you will see that the cluster is a mature technology, but requires high customization. So there is lots of work you need to do on your side, okay, in terms of design, in terms of how do you want the data access to be locally, globally, NFS, SAN, using iSCSI, using what kind of file system. There's lots of decisions you need to take. So one of the decisions is the users. The users, you can allow them to access the cluster through a master node, so that makes life easier to control the security aspects of it. Okay, how about administration? Administration, give your administrator a management node and give them a management network so they can actually manage it from a management network. So the first activity is provisioning, and this is a very important activity. Why? Because we're using commodity hardware. It fails. You have to provision during deployment time, and you have to provision on a daily basis sometimes. You saw the Google report about how they predict failures on hard disks. They found it's 50-50. No matter how much monitoring you have, you still cannot predict it. It's 50-50. So when it comes to commodity hardware, failure is not an option. It will be there. It's mandatory. You'll have failures. So you have to be proactive and act on failures.